Okay, so just give me a minute. Okay, so I'm sharing screen now. Can you see my screen? Can someone confirm?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, good. So let me. Okay, so just to let's begin. Okay, so welcome to the Introduction to Programming Languages, Introduction to Programming course. So both the BSc students and MSc students have to do this. How many of you have, so among the BSc students, how many of you have done programming before, and what languages have you seen?
Sir, should we unmute and say?
C, C++,
Yeah,
Java.
Okay, C, C++, Java. Is there anyone who has not seen programming till now? I think that's a better question to ask at this point.
If you mean like till 12th standard level,
Yeah, till 12th standard level, have you not done programming?
that I've done.
Who?
No.
Yes, sir. Sir, I haven't done any programming till 12th standard.
Okay, good. Yeah, so yeah, okay, fine. Anyone else? So there
Sir, I
are
have
people who have not done programming. Of the people who have done programming, how many has? What kind of programming languages have you seen? C, C++.
Sir, C++,
Python.
Java.
So mostly
Python.
Java and Python.
Java and Python.
Okay, so right. So has anybody been exposed to Haskell before? I mean, not that it is a prerequisite. I just want to know.
I have.
You haven't? Okay. Not many have. I heard that some of you have already installed GHC, etc., which is a good thing. Yes. Oh, wow. Python, Rust, Scheme, Haskell, etc. Very nice. Okay, good. So, the wide variety of languages that, I mean, there are some who don't know, who haven't done programming. There are some who learned a wide variety of languages. Not very few of you have seen Haskell before, which is good. So I won't be boring you with things that you already know. And so please feel free to ask me questions at any point of time. Like Professor Madhavan and others mentioned in yesterday's meeting with the students, don't hesitate to ask questions, because once you, if you delay a bit, then things will become too overwhelming. Okay. So there is nothing to be scared about. This is not a very hard course, okay? And you shouldn't, you shouldn't suffer because you didn't ask questions on time. Okay, so please, at any point of time, any questions you have, please ask. Don't think that people will think you're silly or whatever. When I learned Haskell, I had way more silly doubts than you are going to have, I'm sure. Okay, so. So yes, so good. Okay, so we meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 15:30. Look at all the sacrifice I make for you. My nap time, I'm staying awake to teach you. Okay, so just some administrative details. So there are 5 TAs: Aryan Agarwala, Arindam Bhattacharya, Aniruddhan Ganesaraman, Nilava Mitya, and Deeptaksha Palit. At some point of time, you might be able to, meet them on Zoom or whatever. How many of you have registered for the course on Moodle, or is it that you get automatically registered? How many of you have seen the Moodle page for the course?
So you have to manually enroll.
Yes, sir. We have to manually register.
Oh, I have to manually unmute. No, what do I have to do?
No,
No,
sir.
no,
We have
sir,
to
we-
manually
Yeah,
register.
enroll.
Students
You
have,
had to manually register. Okay, fine, good. Okay, so and you registered. Okay, enough. Please, everyone, register for the course at early enough, because I'll be posting all the slides, etc., on the Moodle page, and any links that I want to provide to extra material, etc., I'll be putting. Okay. Okay, good. So with all this out of the way, let me. Okay, that's the Moodle page. So we'll be using various resources. There are a lot of learning resources for Haskell, starting with, so you can go to the Haskell page and look for, what does the raise hand for? Many people have raised their hands. Is it to ask a question or in response?
You asked who was enrolled in the course.
Okay, it was in response to that. Okay, so there are lots of resources. You can go to haskell.org. I hope it goes there. Yes, so this is the Haskell homepage, and you have documentation. And under documentation, you have lots of introductory books for learning Haskell. Some of these books are online. Haskell from the very beginning. Even I have not seen this. Okay. So there is a DRM free PDF. It says, which is 19. Oh, this is a new book. It says, okay. When was it? Even I have not seen this. Okay. Okay. So this is that's a book. This is Learn New Haskell for Great Good. This is you can buy the hard copy if you want. It looks very nice. It's a very attractive looking book, or you can just read it online. Okay. So very systematically it goes through the whole thing. The whole book, whatever you would get if you buy the physical copy of the book, which I can show you here, is the same thing that you can get. This is what the book looks like. Okay, so Learn New Haskell for Great Good, very nice book, but it's a little costly. Sure, it's around $50 and so on. There is no Indian edition, so it's best to use this web page. There are many other nice books. This one is a very nice book. It's called Thinking Functionally in Haskell. Okay, and but it's perhaps a second level book. So this Learn New Haskell for Great Good is very nice. I shall try to follow. I'll be following many of these sources, not just one source, but at least I'll try to one nice source is this. Programming with Haskell by Graham Hutton. Okay, even I don't have a physical copy. I have a PDF, and I don't need to tell you how to obtain PDFs. If you want, I'll make sure you get a PDF. Okay, to follow this book. So this is an older book, Introduction to Functional Programming Using Haskell. Thinking Functionally with Haskell is what I showed you here. Haskell. And yeah, so Real World Haskell is an older book, which is also both a physical book as well as a website where you can see things for free. Okay, so let me see what. Yes, so there are all these books. But Real World Haskell is a little more. Yeah, that's also an introductory book, but it teaches you a lot more. Okay, okay, so it is freely available online, but you can also buy a copy. And this is a little old now. This is more than 15 years old now. Still worth it. So you can go through the chapters online here if you want. Okay. And apart from all this, there are various courses, and you can follow at various levels of difficulty. Some of these tend to be more difficult, especially the courses highlighted on the Haskell page. They tend to be more difficult, but you can have tutorials, etc. Okay, some short, dense ways of doing this. lots of online resources, including problems and whatnot, problems that you can work on yourself. Okay, fine. So this is what the Haskell page tells you. So the Haskell page is a very useful resource. You can go there whenever you want. And the Haskell page is also useful for one more thing, which is the these are all the various books. You can see the slides. I'll upload the slides. Plenty of other resources. You can also look at the libraries that Haskell provides you. You can go to documentation, and that's a very useful way of learning Haskell, which is to go to the library documentation, as they say. This. You can go and browse packages. If you say browse packages, it will show you all the libraries that are available for you. Depending on your installation, not all of them might be available for you when you install Haskell, but you can always do this Cabal install and install a particular thing. Yes, Ajay Krishnan, what question do you have?
Sir, will we be getting all the PPTs which you will be presenting in every
Yes,
class?
I'll be putting up all the PDFs on the Moodle page. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir. Thank
Okay.
you.
Besides putting up all these, I'll record all these sessions, or I'll live stream the sessions on YouTube. Okay. Either I'll record and then put it up on YouTube, or I'll live stream. Okay. Fine. Okay. Good. So you have all this documentation. So just to reassure you that you needn't ever feel lost when you're trying to do Haskell. If there is any new thing, you can always go, and I think it's Google API search. Go here and yes. So here you can go and libraries. Okay. So maybe make a link of this, make a note of this page. I think I have Haskell lib online is the Haskell library online. This tells you all the libraries that are there. That's a very good way to learn Haskell. Yeah, so you're not lost for resources. Okay, fine. Good. So just to reassure you, what are the aims of the course? That said, the aim of the course is not to become a Haskell wizard, though it is very welcome if you if you try to become a Haskell wizard. It's a very nice language to learn. It's a pleasure to learn. Yeah, and you can have a lot of fun learning more and more Haskell. But since it's a beginning programming course, the main aim is to learn algorithmic problem solving, mainly to Haskell has an advantage, which we'll see today in today's lecture. But Haskell has this advantage that you can more or less reasonably, in a straightforward manner, transcribe your mathematical problem specifications into functional programs, into a program in Haskell, unlike in other languages where you might have to do a little more work. Okay, so sometimes your language, the tool that you use, will distract you from the main task at hand, which is to solve your problem. Okay, you might end up spending more time to solve the problems introduced by the programming language rather than solving your original problem itself. Okay, and any language that is very allows you to express ideas concisely and in a very straightforward manner lets you focus your main attention on the problem itself and not on the nitty-gritty of the program. Okay. Okay, so that is one reason why we choose Haskell as a vehicle to teach algorithmic problem solving. Of course, this is not the end of it. Throughout your stay at CMI, you will be learning lots of courses devoted to just algorithms and their analysis, etc. But one of the main purposes of learning a programming language is to be able to solve problems using algorithms. And yes, so that is the thinking that we want to introduce in this course. Okay. So we'll look at some common data structures and analysis of those data structures, etc. But later, okay, after we introduce the medium of expression itself, the Haskell language itself, how to define stuff in Haskell, solving simple problems in Haskell, and slowly building up towards more complicated data structures. But already you will see that some of the more powerful data structures are introduced right at the beginning. Okay, So one thing you might want to learn, one thing you would learn in a you ought to learn in a programming language course. Whether I end up teaching it or not, it's a different matter. Is to how do you break down a large programming task into various bits, and how do you structure these large programming tasks? This is not a science, but rather you need to just get experience with this and get a feel for it. Hopefully, we'll see a couple of examples at least of how to structure some large programming tasks. But mainly, we'll be looking at problem solving. Simple. We'll start with some simple bits, and yeah. So throughout your career as a computer science student, you will build up on this. Okay? You'll build on this. Okay, good. So Haskell is a functional programming language. What are functions? At least as far as Haskell is concerned, a function is a mapping that takes one or more arguments and it produces a result. Okay. For if you give it a particular argument, it should produce a single result. Okay. It shouldn't produce multiple results for the same argument. Okay. And if you write a function in Java or C, let us say, people who are programmed in Java or C, can you guarantee this? For the same arguments, you will always get the same result?
No, sir.
Why not?
Because there is the state of the program might change.
Yes, you might, for instance, read some global variable or whatever. Okay, the input that the argument that you pass to the program might be to the function might be something, but the function might not use it. The function might be reading some user input and will be returning that as the result. Okay, in which case you can never guarantee this. But so this is the point. So when you do programming in other languages, you are immediately hit with this mental model of a program where you need to take all these into account. Whereas in Haskell, to begin with, you can just view a function like a mathematical function. So this, what I have written here is a mathematical, is a notion of what you might have seen of as a function in high school, for instance. The function is just a map from some values to some domain to some codomain or range, such that for every value in the codomain, or if the function has multiple arguments, for every combination of arguments, there is exactly one value. Okay, so that is the thing. How do you define a function in Haskell? So in mathematics, how do you define a function? You can define a function through a formula. You might say f of x equals, I don't know, sin x. Okay, or you might say f of x equals x squared plus 5. So these are all functions in mathematics. But you can also define functions in abstract in mathematics, right? You can say, consider the function f of x given by these given by this table of values. Okay, and you might explicitly give that table, or it could be an infinite table where you don't explicitly give that. Okay, in general, a function is just a set of pairs of values with some extra conditions. Okay, but when we say a function in a programming language, or in particular, when we say function in a functional programming language, we mean just an equation, okay, with a function name, with names for arguments and a body. Okay, for instance, here is a function. Double x is a function. It's a simple function. Double is the name of the function. X is the name of the arguments, and x plus x is the body. Okay, the body tells you what will give rise to the result. Okay, based on the argument names. So you write functions. What do you do with functions?
So we call functions.
You call functions. Okay, so that again is an unfortunate this thing when you learn some of these other complex programming languages. But in a mathematical, if you have a mathematical function, what do you do in mathematics? If you have a function, what do you do with the function?
We put the value of variable.
No, you apply the function to a value. Okay, so you have sin x. What do? You can apply that function.
So we evaluate it at points.
That is what I mean by applying it. You evaluate it at points. Yes, very good, very good. So yeah, you evaluate it at points, or in other words, you apply the function to an argument, and that leads to a computation. Okay, so what happens when you apply the function f to 5, where f is x squared plus 5? It gives rise to a computation, right? So you will plug the value of 5 in place of x. The original function was x squared plus 5. So now you will do 5 squared plus 5, which will give you 30. Similarly here, you can say, okay, this is my function, double of 3. You can call it to the actual. So applying functions or evaluating functions at points means replacing the actual arguments, namely 3 here, in place of the argument names in the body of the function. The body of the function is x plus x. You're going to replace the actual argument 3 in place of x in the body. So you'll get 3 plus 3. Okay, that is 6. Okay, this is your idea of a mathematical function. What happens when you evaluate a function at a point? Okay, and this is precisely what you need to know about functions in Haskell also. That's all. There is nothing more that you need to know. Okay, all that you need to know about functions are that functions have a definition. The function name, you place the names of the arguments. We'll come to how exactly you place the names of the arguments. What happens if there are multiple arguments, etc. later. But you specify the function name, the argument names, and the body, which is an expression, which tells you what to do with the arguments. And when you want to evaluate, you just replace the argument name with the actual unit. Any questions so far? Reasonably clear, right? What can be?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Is this the official syntax of Haskell, or are you just trying to make us understand what a function is?
No, this is the official syntax of Haskell. In official Haskell, you can just write functions like this. That's it. You don't need to write double within parenthesis, something, open brace, etc. Basic functions are just equations like this. Okay.
Sir, is recursion possible in Haskell?
Yes, it is possible. We'll mention it. Recursion is central to Haskell. We'll come to it in a bit. Yes. Chandradeep, was it you who asked the question?
Yes, I have done some functional programming in C++ before, where you do it with templates and compile time. So there is no.
Let us not bring all that now because. What is your question?
In C++ template programming, there is no way to take any inputs, but in Haskell we will be doing normal programming, so we will need to do inputs and outputs. How will you do that? How will we do
We'll
that?
do it. We'll come to that later. Okay, so don't worry. So for the moment, we will do functions without doing inputs and outputs from the user. Let us just get through baby steps first. We'll come to that.
Okay.
Okay, good. So this is it. And now, I mean, what can you put in place of x? Here I put just 3, which is a number, but it need not just be 3. This is very simple, right? But there is no, you can do stuff even here. For instance, you can say double of 2. Okay, you can put any expression in place of the argument name. Okay, that's possible with mathematics also. No, you can form if I mean, it depends on what kind of function you have. You might not always be able to do sine of x, but you might be able to do if you have I don't know, what can you do? You can double of x is a perfectly mathematical function. Okay. Yes, Chandra, Harish. Yes.
Sir, first we define the function as double x equal to x plus x, and
Yes.
then if we write double of 2, it will return 8. That's the.
Yeah, that is the point. Yes, double of 2 is what you write. You are applying the function, but I am
Yeah.
illustrating the computation here. This is not what you write as a definition. Remember,
Yeah,
okay, good. Is that what you wanted to
Yes, that's
clarify?
correct.
Yes, this is not a definition. Okay, the earlier thing is a definition. I am illustrating a computation here. You will not see this computation when you run Haskell, but I am just showing you. I'm illustrating to you what happens if you say double of 2. It might, for instance, do it as double of 2 plus 2, which will be double of 4, which is 4 plus 4, which is 8. Okay, or what else could it do? Is this the only thing that is possible?
It could do double of 2 plus double of 2.
Yes, could do double of 2 plus double of 2, and then it will slowly do, to double of 2 is 2 plus 2, which is 4. And then this double of 2 is 2 plus 2, which is 4, and then finally it will say 8. Okay. Actually, we'll learn later that what Haskell does is it will do double of 2 plus double of 2. Okay, and then it will say 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, 4 plus 4, 8. Okay, so it will not do these things separately, but it will do it when it reduces this, that will also get reduced. But just in case you are wondering, but I mean, there are these two ways of doing things. Okay, and there are choices. Okay, in how you proceed with your computation. Fine, but these are all issues that we can talk about later. All I am emphasizing right now is that for you to understand a Haskell program, all you need to know is this, that functions are written in that manner. You write a function name, argument names, body, and then computation proceeds by substitution. Substitution is the only thing you need to know. Substitution or rewriting. Okay. Our notion of computation is rewriting. I'll emphasize this in a couple of slides later. Things are fine so far. Okay. Okay. So here is an example. Okay. So here I want to contrast the functional programming style with other styles, and this is a nice problem. It's a very simple problem. It's a problem of computing sum of numbers from 1 to n. How would you do it in a language like Java or C++ or whatever?
So,
Let us C or Java.
sir, for
Use a loop.
You use a loop. What do you do in a loop?
So we
Make
variable
make an
sum.
accumulator and just keep on adding values from 1 to
No, can one of you volunteer to just one person answer?
We define a variable sum
Who is
equals to
this? Who is this talking? I can't see you.
I'm Aryan.
Aryan. Okay. Yes.
So we
Aryan.
take,
Oh, I hope you are not the Aryan who is the TA of this course.
no, I'm Aryan Kusre.
Okay, good. Because I mean, with all this online teaching, I'm losing all my sense of name to face correspondence. I hope I'm not ending up doing some major mistake like that. Okay, good. Yeah. You are Aryan what?
Aryan Kusre.
Sorry, I still can't see your name. Aryan. I think I need to do something to my list of participants on the thing. Aryan, what did you say? Sorry. No, let me expand my list of participants.
Sir, it's Kusre. Also,
Oh, Aryan Kusre. Okay, so how do I get to see whoever is talking? Focus should shift. No, it doesn't shift for me. It's okay.
turn on speaker view. You turn on speaker view, the person who's talking there.
Okay, so turn on speaker view. So even after so many years of using it, I still I am having problems with. Okay, okay, fine, sure. So I can fix that by the time we meet next. Yes, Aryan Kusre, please tell me. You wanted to tell how to do this.
Yeah, we define a variable sum equals to 0 and the index I. So
Yeah.
we do sum equals sum plus I and run I from 1 to n.
Okay, good, good. View. That's good. Yes, so that's something like this is what you do. Okay, so you have a total, a variable called total, and then you run from count equals 1 till count less than or equal to n. As long as count is less than or equal to n, you do total equals total plus count.
We
So-
can also do it in a different way, wherein we can just compute the actual function's value directly, like total is equal to n into n plus 1 by 2.
Sure, you can do that, but this is one way.
Or you could do
Suppose
it
you don't know-
recursively also.
Suppose you don't know that formula, then you'll do this. Who said that you can use that formula?
Ajay
Ajay what?
Ajay Krishan.
Okay, good. I shouldn't be asking Ajay what since I am just Suresh. So I'm just Suresh, nothing. But anyway, it's okay. Okay, good. So this is the way to. What is central in this whole program?
Sir, the loop, the iteration.
The loop, but where is all the action happening? Inside the loop, but what is all the action?
adding values to
Changing.
the total variable.
Yes, the main action is the change in a variable. So this whole paradigm of programming that you are normally used to is to have a notion of a stored value. Okay, you have a computer, and in your computer there is something called memory, and in memory there are values stored, and this total actually refers to some location in memory. It's a convenient name for a location in memory, and whenever you do total equals total plus count, some change happens to the value that is stored in that memory location. Okay, so this is the central paradigm. So if you want to think about a program, you have to, if you want to write a program, even if you want to solve a problem, you have to have this view in mind. Oh, how do I? So I mean, it becomes very natural to you once you start learning programming, but you can see how much removed it is to your original task. Your original task was to sum numbers from 1 to n, right? I mean, it is not too removed from that. You are trying to solve that, of course, but look at the terms in which you are thinking about the problem. In your original problem, there is nothing about storing something somewhere, changing something or whatever. All you want is, your original problem asks for a function. It's a function which says compute something for me. And you are translating that function into something which involves all this. this is a simple program. I'm not denigrating this program, but I'm saying that this is a viewpoint, and in functional programming, you have a viewpoint that de-emphasizes all this. In fact, till you won't even know how to change the stored value, etc., etc. What is the concept of a stored value unless you do advanced Haskell? Okay, right now you will go through a whole course in Haskell, the purely functional part, and you wouldn't know how to store a value and change a value, etc. And that is fine, because you can solve lots and lots of problems even without all. Okay, fine. Okay. So a functional programming is a style in which the basic mechanism is just applying functions to arguments. Okay, not changing stored values or any such thing. So for instance, here is my solution for this. I mean, it's decidedly silly because it looks like I'm just doing some minor rewording, but that is the point. Sum is a built-in Haskell function. We'll see later how to do sum. Okay, but sum is a built-in Haskell function, and the way you would normally solve such kinds of problems is to say, build a list from 1 to n and sum all the elements in that list. That's it. Okay, that is my function. So just to tell you that you will start thinking of solutions to problem in this light. Okay, rather than thinking of have a counter and then keep changing its value, etc. You will think of it as functions applied to others. Okay, to begin with. Okay, and this is a function. So this is, you might think of it as some special notation, but you will eventually learn that it is special notation, but it is special notation for a function. You can define that function yourself very clearly. Right now I'll call it just dot inside square brackets that forms a list. Okay, given two endpoints, 1 and n, and it knows how to what is the next element after 1, etc. Okay, that is part of the definition of natural numbers or integers or whatever the domain, whatever the particular data type is in Haskell, and it will build the corresponding list for you. And sum is a library function. It's a very basic library function which sums all the elements in a list. Okay, we'll later in today's class itself see how to possibly implement sum using, as somebody who asked me about recursion. What are S and P in process name?
Sir, I had a question. Here in the list, we just mentioned 1 ... n. Then how would the program assume that I am referring to all integers?
We'll come to that. No, so the program has its own way of assigning default. Sum is a function that applies only to certain numeric types, so it will know what will come there. We'll come to it. Yes, there's a good question. We need to have a notion of type. We'll talk about types in a little bit. Okay.
So like if we want to form a list of only the even numbers till n, then what do we do?
We can do that. We'll come to that later. Okay. You can find it out. You will write 0, 2, ... n. That will form all the even numbers till n. Okay. Just like you will do in mathematics. Okay. If somebody asks you all the even numbers, you won't keep writing 0, 2, 4, etc. Right? You will say put inside this square bracket is like the braces you will use in writing mathematics, the set builder notation or whatever you call it in high school. Okay, so you'll write 0, 2, 4, ... 6. In Haskell, you just write the first two elements, 0, 2, ... 100, let us say. Then it will know what the common difference is. It will, 2 minus 0 is 2, so therefore I should just keep 2 elements at a time. Okay, you can also write 0, 3, ... 100. It will do 0, 3, 6, etc. We'll come to all this later. Okay. Okay, this is just to illustrate how you approach problem solving is what I'm trying to tell you now. Okay, so how does this computation look? This computation is simple. Sum up to 5. Remember, you have to just substitute 5 instead of n wherever in the body. The body is sum 1 ... n. Instead, it will be sum 1 ... 5. 1 ... 5 expands to this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, Srimati, I'll come in a minute to your question. Sum of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is nothing but 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 equals 15. Yes, what is your question? Have you unmute? Have you? I can't hear you. Yes, Srimati, please unmute yourself. Are you speaking? No. Yes, Srimati, did you have a question? Can you unmute yourself and ask? Can anyone hear her?
Sir,
She posted on the chat, what is a library function? Mic isn't working.
Okay. What is a library function? Yes, good. So this is a very good. So a library function is what do you find in a library? You will find lots of books with things that people have created already, which you can refer to. That's basically what a library function is. A library is a collection of functions that others have written for the common good, let us say. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. You can go and use it. Some library functions are more equal than others because these are always part of any Haskell installation that you do. Okay, the builders of Haskell themselves will write these. So the point is, how much do you put as part of the core language? Okay, the sum function, you can say it is part of my language itself, right? That is one way to do it. But a nicer way to do it is to say that I will build a small core language and a set of core functionalities like some product, whatever you want. I will write Haskell programs for them and I will make it available to everybody who installs Haskell. Okay, so basically a library function is a Haskell program that somebody has written for you. Okay, you don't need to worry about it. In this case, sum happens to be a Haskell function that the creators of Haskell themselves have written, and they have put it. They will make it available on all Haskell installations. Okay, no matter what you do, you don't need to specifically install a library for that. Okay, it is part of a library called Prelude. Prelude means this is part of every Haskell program. Okay, it's a bunch of definitions that have already been. Is that clear? Srimati, can you type and tell me if it's okay for you? Yeah. So anyone else has a question?
Yes, sir. I just have a quick question.
Yeah,
Is
who
this
is it?
sum function internally implemented with the loop, or is it recursive?
No, it is. We will see the implementation. It's written as a Haskell program. It's recursive. Who asked this question?
Sir, me, Anand.
So sorry, I still haven't. I have to 1 second. Where do I find this view thing? I'll have to go to.
So it's on the top right.
It's on the top right. Top right there. Is the question.
Sir, I think you need to switch to the Zoom window first, and then you get the option.
Yeah, I know, because I put this thing in. My Zoom is right now in full screen, and therefore I can't get to here. I think view. Okay.
You should open meeting controls.
Hide video panel. No. So manage button. I don't know the manage button. It's okay. So I'm sorry about this, but there has to be some settings here which I'm missing.
Sir, it should be under view, ideally.
It should be under view, but in view I only have hide video panel and show manage participants, etc. And I don't want to manage participants. I just want to speaker mode. No, what is show speaker or such? Is that what you said?
Yes, sir, it's speaker view. Sir, I think you're not able to see it because you're in screen sharing mode.
Right. I suppose so. Yeah, because there are certain things that I won't be able to see if I'm in screen sharing. That's right. Okay. Anyway, it's okay. Let me not waste your time with this. Okay. So, yeah, is this clear? Is this okay for you? This is some example. Okay. So let's just look at a little bit in detail. So every Haskell definition ideally has two parts, though you will see later that you can skip this part and Haskell will automatically figure out what you mean. The first line here, the type specification. But to begin with, we will always write the type specification. Okay. Because we are learning the language, you see. So, and I made a mistake. This thing goes up over the thing. I'll fix it before I upload the slide. It's not a mistake, it's a typographical mistake. The specification goes over the limit. Okay. So Haskell is a programming language for describing functions. A function description has two parts. One is the type of inputs and outputs. The other is the definition or rule for computing the outputs from the inputs or the result from the arguments. Okay. Rather than saying output and input, it's better to say result from arguments. So here is a simple function. We saw double. Here is another simple function, square. Square, you say that its type is from int. The input is int, the output is also int. And this is exactly like the mathematical notation, right? So if it's a function from natural numbers, how do you write? You will write n, right arrow n, right? In school mathematics. So you borrow, just to show that it is very close to that mathematical view of functions, you just use the same notation here. Okay. If it's a function from type A to type B, you say A arrow. That is the type of the function itself. And the rule is this: square x is x times x. Okay. Times is a built-in operator. Okay. And for times, you don't have any, it's not a library function or whatever. It's a basic operator because it has to be implemented at the machine level. Okay. Okay. So here are some basic types. Int, which is integers, and it has various operations. You can do plus, minus, star, slash. Slash means divide. Okay. Slash, though, 1 second, Ajay has raised his hand.
Sir,
yes.
So for a function in Haskell, does it have two line? I mean, like before when you were describing double, you did not mention the first part wherein.
Yeah, the type. I didn't mention the type. Yes.
Like, is it compulsory or?
It is not compulsory. That's what I said. It's not compulsory, though we will make it compulsory in our course, at least at the first half of the course, let us say, because you need to always, typing is a way to enforce correctness, and we'll always try to first give the type ourselves and then write the function. But it is not compulsory. Because this is one of the key features of Haskell. If you don't give the type, Haskell will figure out the type for itself. Okay. That is called inferring the type. It will infer the type for itself. But let us not worry about it now. For now, we'll always give the type. If sometimes you forget the type, it's okay. It will still work out. But in my assignments, etc., that I give you, you'll have to go back and fill in the type. Okay. So you have operations like plus, minus, star, etc., and these operations are can be used both to add plus can be used to add two integers, also to add two floating point numbers or two double floating point numbers, etc. Okay. Slash is what you use for divide in mathematics. The same slash can be used here also, but it will always provide a floating point number. So how many of you have heard of float? People who have not seen computer science in school might not have seen float. How many of you have heard of the word float? If you have not heard, please raise your hand. I think it's better to say those who have not heard. What is it? Adarsh, have you heard, or have you? Srimati, have you not heard of float? Yes. So what kind of numbers do you know in school? Integers. What else? Natural numbers. What else? Anyone can answer.
Decimal.
Huh? Decimal, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah. So rational number. What is the rational number? You know the rational number. Right? What is the rational number?
Sir, P by Q where P is it?
Yeah, P by Q where P and Q are integers. That's the rational number. What is the real number?
The rational and irrational.
Yeah, real numbers are those that maybe in school, I don't know what kind of definition you see in school, those that you can write with some decimal point, etc. These are not integers. So they are like 3.141 ... whatever. The 3.141 is a real number, for instance. It's also a rational number, but a real number is something like square root of 2, etc. These are all numbers. Okay. So when you come to a computer has to represent all these numbers inside the machine. And inside a machine, you only have a finite amount of space. In fact, it is efficient if you can restrict your attention to, if you can store your stuff in small units inside the memory. These units are called cells or memory locations. And each memory location has some bound on how much it can store. Okay. So you cannot store something like root 2 completely accurately. So you need to have some representation for it. And that representation is called float. Okay. Another representation for it, which is a little more accurate, is called double. Okay. So floating point numbers, double precision floating point numbers, etc. These are all just some computer science words to represent real numbers. Okay. So now I see more raised hands. Is it to ask some question or in response to some earlier question? Okay, Dhanush Reddy, do you have a question? Romit.
Sir, I have a quick question. Like, I am trying to execute this on Visual Studio right now, but I have installed the extension. But how to run it?
Right. So you cannot run it on Visual Studio Code. I'll show you how to run it. Okay, Visual Studio. What extension have you? The standard Haskell extension you have done now. I'll show you how.
Haskell extension and the runner, Haskell runner extension.
Oh, there is something called Haskell runner that you have. I don't have that. Okay, I'll show you how I did it. So hopefully I'll get through the slides and get there.
Anyways, I have installed the official.
Okay, good. It's okay. Let it be. I'll come to that. Harish, do you have a question? Yes.
Yes, sir. Suppose we define a function for divisions from, say, we write division from int to int, and then we write div x is equal div x comma y equal to x by y or something.
Yes. In
and
fact,
then
div x.
will it give an error because error output should be float, so will it give an error because of explicit?
Div is a built-in function.
Oh, built-in. Okay.
Div is a built-in function which always gives an int as answer.
Okay.
So therefore, since it gives int as an answer, if you do 5 by 3, let us say, the answer will be 1.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, there are more questions. Yes.
So you said, so does Haskell use double as a data type? In which case?
Capital D. Yeah, capital D double. Yes.
Okay, so using double as a function won't cause any problem.
That is a small d double, whereas the data structure is capital D. All data types will start with a capital letter. Okay, and all functions will start with a small letter. So you don't have this clash. If you write your own function and the name starts with a capital letter, it will complain. Okay.
Okay, so thank you.
Okay, good. So let me proceed. You have floating point numbers or capital D double precision floating point numbers, which are used to represent real numbers. Okay, and you have characters. That's a data type that is used to do things like a %7 ASCII, Unicode, whatever. Though I won't be doing anything with Unicode, etc. You have one of the most basic types is Boolean, which is just two values, true and false. Okay, and you have nice operations on Booleans, equal and or not. Okay, these are operations that you can perform. We'll look at the definitions later. Or does anybody not know the definition of and, or, and not? I mean, please don't hesitate to ask right now, because these are all basic things. If I skip these things, then can somebody? Okay, so.
So please explain these things for me. I am new to computer science.
Good. Who is asking this? Soumyadeep Ghosh, is it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So these are and is a function that when do you say that two things? When do you say that I don't know? I don't know what to say. Yeah. When do you say that? I don't know. Give me some example. Rama killed Ravana and I don't know. Wali killed somebody. I don't know who Wali killed. Wali killed some asura. When will you say this? When will you say that this is true?
When both those statements are true.
Exactly. So that is the AND function. Okay. AND function is a function that, think of it as a function with whose domains have, it's a function with two arguments. Each argument can be either true or false. Okay. And it's so at this point, maybe I should actually go to some GHCA or equivalent. I mean, this is just to, somebody asked how to use Visual Studio Code also, right? Can you see this thing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so right now there is nothing to do. Here it says Haskell. Do you want me to increase the size or whatever? The size is reasonably small here. So for somebody who wanted to know how to use this Visual Studio Code, you can say Command J on the Mac On your thing, there will be something to view this bottom pane. There is this terminal here. If you want, you can push the terminal up if you want. You can say move into editor area. Okay, so basically I'm using a terminal inside Visual Studio Code. And once you are here, you can go to wherever. So the font is too small, right?
Sir, it's fine.
Okay, so you can go here. Maybe you can go to programs also. Okay, fine, good. So, okay, this is how you start. This is a GHC interactive session. I didn't want to start it earlier, but I'll go. Okay, so and is this function. False and false. What should be the value here? Is false. Okay, false and true should be
false.
True and false should be
False.
False.
true and true should be true.
True.
Okay, that is my false function. There are 4 possible combinations of arguments that you can pass to it. There are 4, each has these results. Who asked this question about and?
Sir, Shomadip Ghosh.
So somebody is asking, isn't this the other way around? Sugriva didn't kill Wali, Rama killed Wali. So Ishan Verma, just to recall for Ishan. Anyway, yeah, yes. So who asked this question about and?
Sir, Shomadip Ghosh, me.
And is it clear to you know what and does?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and is a mathematical function, except it is not a function over natural numbers, it is a function over booleans. Similarly, or is a function. Can you, Samadip Ghosh, can you tell me what or will give me values? False or false? What should this be?
False. Sir, open to everyone.
Because he was the one who has not seen it before. Samadip?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me what this is?
No, sir, I'm a bit confused about it.
No, when would you say something holds or something else holds? It is when one of the things is true, right?
Either one of them is true. Yes.
But in this case, neither is true. So therefore, what will you say the value is?
In this case, since neither one is true, so it will be false.
Exactly. Yeah. What about false or true? That's true. True or false? True. True or true is also true. Okay.
Okay.
So this is this function. Not is exactly what it tells you. Not of false is true. Not of true is false. Okay. So these are the functions on booleans. Okay. Let me get back to my slides. Okay. And I mean, but where do you get booleans? You can get booleans by doing relational operators on other data types. Equal to, not equal to, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. You can see that here. In fact, why do I torture you with this Haskell? I have a better. This is a, hopefully this is larger and you are able to see better on this. Yeah. So I can say 2 less than or equal to 5. I'll get true. 3 greater than 2. I'll again get true. 1 greater than 5. I'll get false. Okay. So I can say 2 equal to 4. You don't use just 1 equal to. You have to use equal to because 1 equal to is used for definitions. Okay. F of x equal to. Okay. Single equality is used for definitions. If you want to check for equality, you use equal to. 2 equals 4. What will be the answer? False. Okay. And how do you check? How do you say not equal to in mathematics? You write an equal to and then put a slash across it. So similarly, you write slash equal to. Okay. This will be true. 2 not equal to 4 is has the value true. You are comparing 2 and 4 and asking whether they are unequal. Yes, they are unequal. Therefore, you will get the value. Okay. You can define further functions based on this. One function that you can define, for instance, is XOR. For here, the input is 2 values of type bool, and the output is a value of type bool. So the type of the function is bool, arrow, bool, arrow, bool. Now you might not be familiar with why bool, arrow, bool, arrow, bool. We'll come to that in a couple of classes, but right now just believe that this is the type. And you can define a definition like this. You write the same way, XOR B1, B2, those are the 2 arguments, and what is the value? the value is the result of this expression, B1 and not B2 or not B1 and B2. Okay, that is my definition. XOR means exclusive OR. Exactly one should be true. So either B1 is true and B2 is false, or B1 is false and B2 is true. Is it clear? Anyone?
Yes, sir.
I can also write other functions. I'm giving you three values of arguments, or three values of type int, and I'm asking you whether those three values have been presented to you in order. Or in other words, is ordered XYZ is the same as saying X is less than or equal to Y and Y is less than or equal to Z. Okay. Now this is the body. Okay. Now if
Sir, in the XOR function, if both the statements are true, then we will get a false.
False. Yes, you will get a false. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Good. So now, yeah. So okay. So we'll see more and more. We'll see it we'll see all this in detail. But let me just end by giving you some highlights of Haskell, and I wanted to give you some example Haskell programs just to provide you a flavor of Haskell. It's now okay. So we have 9 minutes left in the class. I might go a little over. I hope you don't mind because we started a little late, but I'll stick to time in the from the next class. Okay. So with Haskell, you can write concise programs, as you have already seen that you just write the definition itself is this thing. So mostly it is you can write just the mathematical definition, and that itself is a valid program. It has a powerful type system, and you will see how powerful this type system is. One of the main features of this type system is that even if you don't provide a type, it will figure out the type. And most importantly, it has something called polymorphism, which you don't need to worry about now, but I'll introduce you just to show you what this language can do. You have lists, you have list comprehension. We have already seen lists at least being used slightly. We'll see all these. These are all basic features of the programming language. In the type system, you also have polymorphism, which is a very useful feature. Lists and list comprehension. You can write recursive functions. You can write higher order functions. We'll see. You don't need to understand what this means right now, but I'm just telling you that these are all some highlights. Lazy evaluation, which is another highlight in Haskell, which you will make use of to write some very, very elegant programs. There are many other features, but we focus on the above for now. I might have missed a few here, but I mean, these are all the real highlights. Okay, at least to begin with. Okay, now let's dive a little deeper into Haskell by just giving you a couple of examples. Sum, for instance, here is how you would. The sum function I mentioned, it's a built-in function. So first of all, the type of sum is something like this, which this is advanced material, which I'm telling you right in the first class. You don't need to completely, you don't need to be able to write things like this. For now, it is fine if you write the type of sum is list of int to int. Okay, you are provided with a list of integers and you produce an integer as value. That is what the square bracket outside a type means. It's a list of elements of that type. Okay, so if you give me a list of elements, each of which is an integer, I can sum it up and that is an integer. But if you give me a list of elements, each of which is a rational number, then if I sum it up, that will be a rational number. Okay, so this is one important feature which you don't need to worry if you don't completely understand now, but I'm just trying to illustrate some of the strengths of Haskell. You don't need to write multiple programs which does the same job on different types. Okay, summing a list of integers is this. Let us first ignore this type part and let us just look at this. Sum of an empty list is what? If you want to sum an empty list of numbers, by convention it is 0. Okay, you can define it to be whatever, but ideally you want it to be the additive identity. Okay, because the whatever is for the empty list, it shouldn't this value shouldn't affect the value of the final sum that you get. So therefore it is logical that you assign 0 to this. Sum of empty list is 0. Sum of x colon x's means x followed by x's. Okay, we'll see all this in detail later, but I'm just to show you how concise Haskell is. X followed by x's, the sum is x plus sum of x's. Okay, this is a recursive function. You are summing x's, which is a smaller list. X followed by x's is a larger list. Okay, x's is a smaller list, you are doing a recursive call on the smaller list, and then you are just saying plus x. Okay. This is the definition part of it. For the type part of it, you don't need to say this. Haskell will automatically come up with this. To begin with, we won't be doing this advanced thing. We'll just be saying int arrow int, list int arrow int. But this just tells you that you can write the same function and use it on values of different types. Okay. So just to illustrate, I can go here and I can write, so I can go here. This is my editor. In fact, to make things easier, I'll yes, 1 second. I'll come to you in a minute. Okay. Who raised hand? Unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Yes, sir. In Python, to understand a block, the Python uses the indentation, and in C, Java, we use the brackets. But in Haskell, we have neither of those. So how does Haskell understand that these much lines form a function?
Very good, very good. So we'll see. Function is just one line, okay, and we'll see indentation rules, etc. As there are multi-line functions, and we'll see what indentation rules, etc. You can use braces also in Haskell, but for now we are writing functions that are single lines. And here, if you notice this function, it is each line is a different definition. This is defining a base case, and this is defining the inductive case. In both cases, you are writing sum on the left hand side. Okay, there are two definitions for sum. Okay, except the two definitions cover different cases. The first definition covers the base case where the input is an empty list. The second definition covers the case of the non-empty list. For each definition, it's a single line definition. Okay, for now it is okay. So what I wanted to do was this, that I have, I should move. Okay, so here, you can see the code, right? It's hopefully not too small or too. If all this color bothers you, I'll move to a white background. Now this function will not compile because I need a main. This is not always the case. I mean, this part is just to make your Visual Studio Code happy. Your function, you could just write these two lines in a Haskell program, and that is fine. Okay. And notice that I am giving the name something.hs. That is the name I give to a Haskell file, Haskell program file. If I go out here, yeah, I have 2109/2021.hs. .hs is the name I give to Haskell code, any file containing Haskell code, and yes, so yeah, now you can come here and GHCI on the, no, I need to change directories. I can load my program. Yes. Now, yes. So now I can ask for the type of a program. Okay. So this gives you something even more complex. Let us not worry about it. I'll ask for the default type. It says integer arrow. Okay. So that's a type you can give to this. And yes. So if you say right. So that's the default type, but you can actually do 1.5. You will get 15. You can also say sum of 2.3, 4.5, 6.7, and you will give the appropriate. Okay. So you don't need to write multiple functions, and somehow normally if you were to write some, it will sometimes complain because you have written the same thing as a existing library function, but I don't know, because of the setting or whatever, it's not complaining here. Oh no, it is complaining actually. It is complaining and saying that sum is already present. No. Oh, okay. Oh, the module names cannot be all this. Okay, so yes, so it will usually complain. So you should say my sum. Something you should use a different name because sum is a built-in function. When you actually write Haskell code, you should write something like this. Okay, and yeah, so it is suggesting a type. Okay, we'll use that type. Okay, that's it. And here you can reload the okay. So I'll explain all this in patiently later when we have more time. So just to yeah, so what will happen when you try to compute this? So you say sum 1, 2, 3, it will unravel the thing. Whenever you have recursive expressions, you still don't need to think about it in terms of, so this is the main point I wanted to convey. You still don't need to think of it in terms of some value being stored in a location which is changed, etc., etc. What is sum 1, 2, 3? It is just go by the definition. It is 1 followed by 2, 3, so it will be 1 plus sum of 2, 3. What is 2, 3? It is 2 followed by 3, so it is 1 plus 2 plus sum of 3. What is 3? It is 3 followed by nothing, so it is 1 plus 2 plus 3 followed by sum of nothing, but sum of nothing is 0. So you have this. Okay, 1 plus 2 plus 3 of plus 0 is 6. Okay, is there any question about this computation?
I wrote that program. Now how to execute from the terminal?
I'll tell you. 1 second. I'll tell you in a minute. Okay. So there is another example that I have about sorting. I'll quickly go through this. We can do this in the next class maybe. Yeah. So the point is that sorting is generally considered to be a very difficult program to write because you have to take care of lots of things. But this is all you need to do for writing a sorting program in Haskell. Okay. We'll explain this in detail in the next class. Okay, I don't want to hurry through this. Yes, so finally let's come to this. So in general, you run something called GHCI, okay, which is called GHC interpreter. GHC stands for Glasgow Haskell compiler. Okay, there were other compilers earlier, but now GHCI has become the standard. Pretty much everyone uses only that. It is used to interactively call built-in functions and use your own functions, etc. It is similar to how Python works, if you have seen Python. Okay, but if you have not seen Python, etc., don't worry. In the next class, to begin the next class, we will just start a session in GHCI and try to load try to write our own program to solve some problem, slowly learn a few things, and then get back to the slides. Okay, so yes, so you create a text file with extension .hs to write your Haskell function definitions, and then you run GHCA at the terminal at the command prompt, and then you just say load. Inside GHCA, you should say load :load whatever your file name is .hs. Okay, and then you can at least this I can illustrate for you. So this is the best. Let us forget this VS Code for a moment. I think that's a distraction. Okay, it's easy for me to write programs, but in a teaching environment, I think it's better to just use the basic things. Okay, so you can use any editor. I can use VI for instance. 21 whatever. Okay, that's an editor where this here I have defined these things like VA doesn't even insist on this main, etc. So let's, okay. Now I need a terminal, and I can say I have spawned a terminal here. So except that I now forgot how to. Okay. I can say GHCI in the terminal. Okay. And I'll say load whatever the name of my program is, 2021. Yeah. Now I have loaded my program. Now I can interact with my program. So my sum 1.5. My sum. Yeah. And this is not all that I can do. I can just use GHCI as a calculator. You know, I can say 2 plus 5. Okay. I can say 2 to the power 5. I can say 5 to the power 2. What else do you want to compute? You can do some pretty nifty things. Okay. One other function that you can write is factorial, right? That's a standard function that you can write. Now, if only I can figure out how to get my focus back to that. But I can write my factorial. What is the definition of factorial?
Sir, n into n minus 1 into n minus 2 till 1.
Yeah, but we'll write it as a recursive function. My factorial of 0 is
n
1.
minus 1 into f of n minus 1 and
Yes.
f of 0 equal
My
to 1.
factorial of 0 is 1. My factorial of n equals n times my factorial of n minus 1. Now notice that I used integer instead of int. Okay, int has bounds. Int ranges from 2 power minus 2 power 32 till 2 power 32 minus 1 or something, or maybe 64. Okay, but if you have now I'm back in GHCI. I have opened GHCI. You see, I have changed something on the terminal and on the file, and I'm in GHCI now. Actually, what I'm doing is also wrong. I should actually show you, to show you the proper workings. I should be saying, just quit here. Okay. So on Windows, you know how to create a new tab, right? Once you have open a terminal, this is the most primitive way of working, and this illustrates everything perfectly. Create a new tab. Okay, I've created a new tab. Go back to the original tab. Keep your programs in this tab. Okay, while you can keep your GHCI on this tab. Okay, now you have to go back and forth. Okay, that will at least make it clear to you what is happening. So from the next class onwards, I'll do this. I'll keep my editor separate and I'll keep my GHCI terminal separate. Go back and forth just so that you are clear what I'm doing. And once we all get used to it, I can move to more fancier tools where I don't need to do so much work. Yes, somebody raised their hand. Yes.
Sir, how to create the tab in Windows, you said?
You don't know how to do it in Windows. I've used Mac. I said Command T. In Windows, I don't know what to do. If you are already using VS Code, you can continue using it. I just found that when I am illustrating this stuff for you, if I use VS Code, it might not be clear to you when I am switching, etc., etc. That is why I moved back to this. Okay. Yeah. So from VA also, I can create a new terminal, that is what I did earlier, and I can switch between here and there. Maybe I can continue to do that. So once again. So I mean, I want to do something that is not too much work for me, but it's also clear to you what I am doing. Okay. So if I'm using VI, and I can create a vertical partition of my terminal and create a terminal on the other side, and I can switch between the two parts of the thing. So if I go to the right, I can do this. Here I can do GHCI. I can come to the left and modify the code. I can go to the right and call these functions in GHCI. Okay. Now the point I wanted to make was, I will stop with this. So this my fact I said was integer to integer. int has bounds, but integer doesn't have any bounds. So this is one nice feature that you have in Haskell. Now, what do you want to give? My fact of, give me some number. 500? No. Oh, sorry. I have to load. Yeah. Oh, oops. Sorry. Ah, good. You see what is happening? This whole. Oh, sorry. I seem to have created a problem.
Sir, in my computer, it's always saying not in scope, no module named.
No, you have to load your whatever the name of your file is. Yeah. Now, if you say my fact of 500, you see it's a huge number that it is able to print out in a jiffy. It is able to multiply from 1 till 500 and give the answer. Okay. But if you did it as int, you won't get this thing. It will give you a value, but that value will be false. Okay, because int cannot handle this thing. So you can do such stuff with GHCI. So I think I'll stop now because I've run way over time. What I'll do is in the next class, I will just start with, yes, people have asked what will happen with the negative input, etc., etc. It will not terminate. It will go on forever. Okay. Subranil did. So if you give it a negative value, it will go on forever. Yes, Soham Chatterjee, what is your question?
Sir, before running the GHCI command, we have to give the path to the file where the .hs file is
Right,
stored.
that is true. But what I did was I opened GHCI from that directory where the HS file was. Okay, that is true.
Oh,
So I'll explain all this in detail in the next class. Okay, I'm sorry to do this thing. We'll in the next class we'll just go to GHCI. We won't do any slides, etc. We'll just have a session where we go through GHCI and maybe slowly write some small programs where we try to make sense of it. Is that okay? So I hope I made some sense today, gave you some idea. There are still things that I couldn't complete on time. We'll come back in the next class and finish it off. Okay. I have shown you how to use GHCI. I have not talked about how you compile Haskell programs, etc. separately. We don't need to know it for now. So we'll. So I thought I would be able to finish all this material and then have enough time left over for a GHCI session. But clearly I judged wrong. But that is okay. So you don't need to worry about all this. We'll come on Thursday and we'll have a very clear session. We'll just do a GHCI session. We'll try to solve a particular problem. Okay, all of us collectively, and then we'll learn as we do that. Any questions so far? If there are no questions, I'll end. But I'll give you a few minutes for questions. Yes.
So, is there a recursion limit for Haskell, or would we just not know if we did something wrong in the recursion?
Usually, the kind of examples that we will see will not hit that limit. But yes, there are times when you will go over the limit because you run out of space or whatever. We won't get to that till we finish some 10 classes at least. So you don't need to worry about it.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? Because there are people who have not done programming before, and I don't think I did a good job today of doing the GHCI session because I didn't have enough time for that. But it is okay. So in the next class, I will not do slides. I'll only do a GHCI session. We'll try to just solve some. We'll write a program on the fly. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So if there is nothing else, then thank you for patient listening. I'll upload this video, etc. I'll also upload these slides and see you on Thursday. Yeah. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. So I need to figure out how to stop recording.